and he's a weak person. And by being weak, unlike other people that you watch, he's a weak person. And what he's trying to do is get a reduced sentence.
If Cohen is such a bum, why did you hire him, have him on your payroll for 12 years, and have him do so much of your dirty work?
Because a long time ago, he did me a favor.
That was President Trump outside the White House today, speaking about his former personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, just the latest Trump associate to plead guilty to the special counsel. But just like every Mueller indictment, there is more than what is on the surface. In particular, the criminal information in the case makes several references to an individual, too. Reading in part, the Moscow Project was discussed multiple times within the company. As late as approximately June 2016, Cohen and individual 2 discussed efforts to obtain Russian governmental approval for the Moscow Project. Individual 2 is presumed to be this man on your screen, Felix Sater. He's a Russian immigrant born in Moscow and a real estate developer, once convicted in connection with a Russian mafia stock fraud. He was a business associate of Trump and was a significant player behind the Trump Soho Tower project. In 2015, Sater promised to engineer a deal with the help of Russian President Vladimir Putin. And in August 2017, the New York Times published portions of email exchanges between Cohen and Sater, including this one, when Sater told Cohen, quote, "I've arranged for Ivanka to sit down in Putin's private chair at his desk and office in the Kremlin. I will get Putin on this program and we will get Donald elected." Sater goes on to say, "Buddy, our boy can become president of the USA, and we can engineer it. I will get all of Putin's team to buy in on this. I will." Now, there is no evidence that Sater actually fulfilled that promise, and Cohen released a statement saying Sater was, quote, "prone to salesmanship." Earlier, NBC's Ken Dilanian spoke briefly to Sater, asking, quote, "You must have known Cohen was lying," Sater responded. "I don't know anything. All I know is I always told the truth." Joining me now, Mother Jones Washington Bureau Chief David Corn and co-author of Russian Roulette and NBC News investigative reporter Ken Dilanian. Okay, Ken, what else did Sater tell you?
That's all I got out of him, Stephanie. He quickly got off the phone. But I think, look, the fact that he is not in jail right now and hasn't been charged with a crime suggests that he has been telling the truth to Robert Mueller all along, because these documents depict a Trump Tower Moscow deal that went on much longer than Michael Cohen admitted at first in under oath testimony to the Congress, and that's why he's being charged with lying. And Felix Sater must have known that. I mean, this was all made public. This has all been written about previously. So it suggests that he's been cooperating. He is a larger-than-life wheeler-dealer ripped from the pages of a John le Carré spy novel. Stephanie, you mentioned some of his colorful history. He's also, he once stabbed a man in a bar fight with a broken martini glass. And after that stock swindle that you mentioned, he began cooperating with the U.S. government and actually served as a U.S. intelligence asset, an asset to the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency, and claims to have helped them with the hunt for Osama bin Laden and with North Korean nuclear weapons. And then he began to work for Donald Trump, and he had a business card that said senior advisor to Donald Trump. And he actually helped develop the Trump Soho. He had a company called Bayrock, which helped Donald Trump develop that project in New York City. But in the campaign, when stories about Sater's felonious past began to come out, Donald Trump was asked about Felix Sater, and he said, "I'm not sure I know that guy," which was sort of laughable to people who know the Trump organization. I mean, Sater was a fixture. And now he shows up again in this deal with Michael Cohen in talks with Russian officials, and the Cohen court documents show that the Russians talked back, which is new information today. The Russian president's office reached out to Michael Cohen and was engaging him on this project, which was hidden from the American voters during the presidential campaign.
To everyone on Air Force One who's watching, Felix Sater's fate, Michael Cohen's fate. Look at these people closest to the president. In the end, didn't know them, kind of knew them. Who are they? That could be you. All right, David, you have written extensively about the president, his Russian connections, his outreach. When Michael Cohen pleaded guilty today, besides you saying, told you so, what was your takeaway?
I think the big point here is something that Ken just alluded to. What we now have is evidence that while Trump was campaigning for president as an America First candidate, he, through Cohen, was secretly interacting with Putin's own office, seeking help on a business deal. That is, the Trump Organization was going to Putin's office and saying, how can we make money in Russia? How can you help us? And all this time, Trump is campaigning publicly. He's not telling a single voter that he has this deal, or he's trying to put together this deal with Putin, with Putin's approval, with his assistance. That, to me, is one of the biggest conflicts of interest in modern U.S. political history. You can't point to any other candidate who had such a big conflict, because while he's doing this, he's out there praising Putin. He goes on Morning Joe, and Joe says, you know, Putin's a killer. He goes, how do you know? How do you know he's a killer? And, of course, something else that Ken just referred to. He was asked in December of 2015, while this deal is underway secretly, you know, what about his relationship with Felix Sater? And he says, I don't know him, basically. He could not admit knowing Felix Sater, because then he would have to reveal this secret deal with Russia that they were going to Putin's office on. I've always thought this was the most undercovered element and least understood element of the whole Trump-Russia scandal. But now it's hitting like a bombshell, and it shows that Trump lied about his connections to Russia and that he was basically conning the voting public while he was running for president.
It wasn't just to Joe and Mika. Bill O'Reilly, I think it was on Super Bowl Sunday, sat across from Trump and gave him the opportunity. He said, Vladimir Putin is a killer. And Trump said, you know, there's a lot of people out there who have done a lot of things. And again, we have to remind our audience, Vladimir Putin isn't just the leader of another country. Obama administration sanctioned Russia and it crippled their economy. If President Trump were to win, lift those sanctions, it would be a game changer for Russia. President Trump could help Vladimir Putin in such a significant way, while President Trump, whose priority has always been his business, was trying to win over the Kremlin and to get a deal like this done. I mean, it's stunning.
Stephanie, think about the message this sent Putin's own office. Here you have Trump, while he's running for president, coming to them for help. So this is a guy you're looking at from Putin's perspective. While his plan to attack the election is already underway, they're hacking the DNC and others, he's looking at Trump because Trump wants me. Trump wants to do business with me. He's the guy I'm going to help. I can do business with him. So Trump is basically saying to Putin, here, I'm your guy, help me.
And here's the other thing, Stephanie. What this shows is that there was a channel between the Trump Organization and Vladimir Putin during the presidential campaign on the Trump Tower project. What other channels were there? Don't forget the dossier, the famous Christopher Steele dossier, alleges that Michael Cohen was an important channel on Russian election interference, that he coordinated with the Russians, and that he went over to do some damage control in 2016 and met with Russians in Europe. Now, he has always denied that, but now he's a proven liar. So can we trust his denials? I think that's going to be an area of reporting going forward.
Jog my memory. Didn't at one point Jared Kushner talk about actually creating a back channel line of communication after President Trump won between the White House and Russia? Am I remembering correctly, David?
Yes, exactly. He talked about this during the transition period, wanting to have some private communication channel. And mentioning the Steele dossier, you know, the first memo on the first or second page says that one way that Russia's trying to co-opt and cultivate Trump is by dangling business opportunities in front of him. I mean, this just nails it on the nose. This is what they were doing with Trump in 2015 and throughout 2016. We can do business. We can work with you here. So, I mean, that's one aspect of the Steele dossier that's been, you know, enhanced by this new information.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.